Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. Today, I'm excited to be here again with my co-host, Lucas McCann. Hi, Lucas.
Hello.
And we are excited to welcome Dean West with Association Laboratory. We actually referred to his Looking Forward 2021 report a couple weeks ago on the blog and got interested in it, and we got connected through Nikki, one of his strategists. And we're so excited that you're here today, Dean. I thought we'd kick this off by letting you tell us a little bit about Association Laboratory for all of our audience.
Sure, happy to. I started Association Laboratory in 1999 when I was done being an association executive. I'd been a CEO twice. And we have three principal wings. One is we do research and strategy consulting for associations. We're one of the few groups that actually cross domains. So we work in strategic planning, we work in membership, we work in education, value proposition, components, et cetera. We also conduct industry sector research. We do that often in conjunction with a cooperative entity we formed called Association Laboratory Research Alliance, which is made up of approximately 20 state, specialty, and global society of association executives, and it's designed to correct sector research on the changing environment facing association strategy decisions. And then finally, based on that sector research, we put together educational programming designed to improve association leader competencies. So for example, we've been doing a series of workshops based on our environmental scanning sector research on everything from how to improve your advocacy, how to improve your global strategy, membership strategy, et cetera, through the course of the spring.
That's awesome. Well, we were talking in the lead up to the show because you mentioned strategy several times there, and it's really important. And we were saying, people really sometimes can mix up tactics with strategy. And one of the blogs that you recently put on your website was around content strategy and how that's really become like this big thing and almost replaced member strategy. I'm just curious, why do you think that that's become such an issue these days with associations?
Sure. Historically, I think the mistake associations have made is they've looked at the world as a very binary construct. You're a member or a non-member. You're an attendee or a non-attendee. Mm-hmm. And what we've discovered over the last 5 years is, given the changing nature of the environment facing association prospective members, the increase in competitive options ranging from open access publishing on the scientific side to vendor-driven content on the trade association side, people have a lot more choices above and beyond the traditional association pathways. And so what our sector research discovered was that a lot of association leaders were attempting to cast a wider net for participants with their association, people to engage with, not necessarily exclusive of membership. So content strategy is a means of expanding your reach into audiences and expanding your ability to engage people at a level that may not be as expansive as membership, but might be frankly more valuable to them. As we say to our clients, membership is not the solution to every challenge. And so content strategy is a mechanism, particularly because of changes in technology and communication, allows association to expand their reach and seek out wider, more diverse audiences. And then membership is a sub-strategy of that, designed to take the most engaged people that most align with the association and incorporate them more fully into the activities of the association.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think one of the challenges with a lot of associations maybe, and nonprofits in general, they sometimes have a hard time using an analog comparison to like a product company. So market research is something that any car company, any consumer product good company, they are continuously doing. They know that their market's continuously changing, and so there's a complete R&D departments that are delivering results back to CEOs to make decisions on how to continue to address their members, their buyers. I'm curious what you found is a friction in the market for you when you're working with associations in viewing their business very similar to that of keeping audience members engaged all the time through knowing your research, knowing your audience.
Sure. I think it's a philosophical difference from corporate research circles. So arguably most associations look at research as a project. It's something that is done episodically to answer a distinct question. In corporate market research circles, it's considered a process. It's more of a fundamental utility that is woven throughout the, the operations of the company itself. In fact, there's a word called rivering in market research circles, that every time one of your members or prospects or customers interact with you, whether it's they attend a thing, whether they buy a thing, whether they download a thing, each of those are tiny little creeks of information that they eventually combine into a river. And a river never stops because the relationship between a member or a non-member or an attendee or a customer of your association never stops, and it changes over time. And so in corporate research circles, they set up research processes based on decision-making needs to continually funnel that new information to decision makers. But for many associations, it's still considered a one-off project every other year, every 3 years, things of that nature, that address needs at that particular time rapidly go out of date. So for example, when we do research for strategic planning, there's often a really substantial research effort designed to inform the strategic plan. And that is used to create business assumptions to guide the strategy out of the plan. Then a year later, that research isn't updated, or the year after that. And so the fundamental knowledge that informs and underpins that strategy gets more and more obsolete. And yet the association is still moving forward as though it were still relevant and valid. And that's the danger. And once you've, like anything, once you've gone off path, it's harder and harder to get back on path. It's hard to get your leadership to do something different. It's hard to get your staff to do something different. And so what we do is recommend a process that's designed to look at the strategic aspects, that, you know, the world shaping your members' lives and their decisions relative to you, and then a tactical diagnosis of how well you're performing on meeting their needs. And that combination of strategic and tactical done as a process is more efficient, it's less expensive, gives you better data, but also gives you the time to adjust and mitigate for risk or to take advantage of opportunities.
Yeah, some associations, I think, have done a good job of recognizing this through digital marketing or their website, right? The website isn't something that you do once and then you're good, right? It has to continue to evolve and develop, and research is the same way. I mean, I think you'd suggest like just doing one spot gives you one specific point in time, but you know, if you keep doing it and you start to zoom out, you can really recognize where the trends are, and that's where the strategy really gets layered in.
Correct. I think the other issue on this is many of the traditional products of associations, think the big annual conference and trade show or the journal, are designed for very deliberative step-by-step evaluation and vetting. But the world isn't nice and neat like that. It's messy and fast. And so as far back as 25 years ago, when I was working with the American Society of Clinical Oncology, we had the huge annual scientific conference, but we're trying to figure out mechanisms to address hot issues, things that had come up more recently. Well, now when you look at the big annual conference, you know, the concept that everything there is to learn is going to be presented in March or April just is no longer relevant.
Right.
That everything should go through an incredible peer validation for a journal is less relevant. It's not that those are not still important avenues. It's that you now need mechanisms that take into account that the world within which your members operate, the changing science, the changing business conditions of your trade association is changing much faster. And it's much more complicated because it's being influenced by so many different things. And as an association, you have to adjust that as a result. And that's why when we look at our sector research, the two areas that associations are most challenged by is face-to-face meetings, and that was prior to the pandemic, and membership. Well, face-to-face meetings and membership are historically two of the most static strategies. They're hard to change, they're hard to do differently. At the end of the day, your meeting's on the day it is, and if you can't make it, you can't make it. So the more static your strategy, the more challenging the environment to be successful if you're an association.
Yeah, we mentioned before this that, and if you fall behind in some of these strategies, even a couple of years, I think you mentioned, it's almost impossible to catch up. I mean, how would an association, outside of doing something, you know, dramatic, you know, make up a little bit of ground if they start to feel themselves slipping?
I think there's two approaches to this. One is, just as it takes time to fall behind, it takes time to catch up. Rome wasn't built in a day. So we often, when we do strategic value proposition, we basically, you've got 3 years to do this. So you're losing ground incrementally, which means you've got time to solve it, but you have to start working on it.
Right.
The solution starts with understanding, first of all, of course, who you're trying to serve, how what you do for them is different than those alternatives, but then building systems around it instead of projects or products around it. And because if your system is built around it, and you know who they are, and you know how their needs are changing, and you're taking account of those needs, and you're designing programs and services initiatives to address those needs as a continual process, then as their needs change, you will adjust with them, and you have the opportunity to make up that ground relative to other people who are serving them. And I think that's where association leaders get frustrated because they want an immediate success. And as I said once to one of my clients, we had the youngest volunteer leader in the room who just started working with the organization stand up, and I pointed to him and said, "That's the person who's going to be applauded for the decisions all the rest of you are making today, because it's going to take that long to see the result." And then he'll be on the board or chairman of the board or something like that. And that's hard for a lot of volunteers who want something good to happen this year. And that reinforces that project mindset. They also don't want anything bad to happen on their watch. And that creates disincentives for risk taking when risk taking is essential to be successful.
Yeah, well said. I mean, you have to be a little bit, we've said this on other episodes, you have to be a little bit more maybe business minded than maybe we've been in the past in the association industry. Take some risks, take some calculated risk, but I really like what you said. Give yourself some patience to on ramp. It's not
Sure.
going to be, even though the culture is very snappy and Instagramish and I want it now, like give yourself some time to, build your strategy, implement your strategy and execute. I like
Yeah,
that.
you don't have to be first. You want to be best.
Right.
So a lot of us in the 90s got seduced by the first to market concept.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's better to come in later and better than sooner and worse.
Yeah. Well, and if you're thinking about content strategy also, and I think I remember this from looking forward 2021, one of the biggest competitions that associations see out there are things like LinkedIn groups and other social media groups that have formed. And so if you're thinking about your content strategy, you're competing with people who are capable and iterative and responding in the moment to what the conversation is on that particular platform. And
Right.
you don't need to become them. You should probably figure out how to join them there on those platforms. But you do need to, I mean, I imagine that's how research works. Like you're saying, it's not a project. It's research is something that iteratively can help you make the small incremental changes you need to make to start to see that ROI quicker. And maybe that's some of the mentality that people need to change so that you can feel confident that the bigger strategy is going to come into play and really pay off in a couple of years or in a time frame, a time horizon, right?
Yeah. Well, plus if you can't get the small things right, you can't get the big things right.
Right.
The other thing about the research side of it is, there's a lot of confirmation bias, and that's not a critique of any particular group. We all have that.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're trying to do is get an independent look or a controlled look at your environment. So, for example, with all our clients 3-4 years ago, the people that were responsible for leadership were heavily involved in academia. And so, what they encouraged the association to do was to increase quality of standards for certification, to promote activities that were designed to upgrade or increase the level of professionalism and things of that nature. And it was all done with the best of intentions. How do we make our folks better, more educated, and all those sorts of things? What they discovered was that a lot of the folks didn't want that. They didn't want to advance in the way we thought of it. They didn't want another credential. They didn't want to get a job higher up the ladder. It was in healthcare. They liked their job and they liked their patients. And so we discovered that almost 60% of their audience was tuning out the message out of their leadership because it was unrelated to what they wanted. And so one of the things we came back to them and said, well, how do you increase their happiness with you on the assumption that they keep their current job? Because that's what they want. They don't want to advance. And so that was probably the biggest insight for them. That the reason they were losing members is they kept trying to tell 60% of their members they wanted something that they did not. But they
Right.
couldn't see it because the volunteer leadership was so caught up in the concept of advancement. for
Amazing what you
professional
can
use.
learn if you just
Yeah, and
ask.
again, not negatively, but it's a great aspiration as
Mhm.
leaders. You know, they wanted all the best for everybody, but they had become out of touch with the reality of a majority of the members' lives, kind of by mistake. And they were all listening to each other and encouraging each other to go in that direction. They didn't have a voice that could contradict them.
Yeah. We've sunset a lot of affinity programs over the years simply by listening to what members want and maybe more importantly, what they don't want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the content strategy allows you to be more responsive. So the good news is it's easy to produce content and it's easy to monitor how people relate to it.
Yeah.
And on one of my speeches, I show a graphic of food trucks, and one of the food trucks has a long line, and three of them don't. And I go, if you walked up, you would know which of these food trucks had the best food.
Right.
And so you can do similar things by monitoring your website.
Yeah.
The advantage of associations that is hard to duplicate is the network that gives content context.
Right.
So as a company, we have a strong content strategy, have for 10 years. We produce sector reports, we do white papers, we produce all sorts of educational workshops and summits and things of that nature. But creating a community around it to add context is really expensive and difficult to do. And so the associations have been doing that for a long time. Putting your members into a room to talk about a complicated issue isn't something that's exotic. Producing an article about that same topic is not something associations haven't done. They've been doing it for years.
Right.
It's putting them together that is difficult. And so what associations overwhelmingly are structured around product lines. You have the advocacy department, you have the publications and education, the journal, the meetings, and
Membership.
none of the two shall talk. In modern day content strategy, what you have is a mechanism to determine what is the most relevant content to our members and other stakeholders right now, and then how does it get distributed? You don't start with, we should do a journal or we should do a meeting. And so a lot of associations are struggling because structurally they're set up along product lines, but their audience doesn't care about their product lines. They care about what they want, when they want it, and why they need it. And if it comes from someone else because it takes you 6 months to produce it, then they go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Well, we always want to leave more on the table for people to come and make sure they want to seek you out and learn more about Association Laboratory. So we'll wrap up here, but I think your perspective on, research allows you to not be myopic. It allows you to look at everything from every perspective and not just have research. I think you might have mentioned this before we got on air, but also to have the ability to analyze that research, give context to the research, the results, and then help build a strategy from that. So we've really appreciated your perspective on this, Dean. Thank you so much for being
My
here
pleasure.
today. As you know, normally before we end these episodes, 6 degrees, we've got to make another connection here. So we're curious, do you have the name of someone that you think our audience would benefit from hearing from next?
You know, when it comes to membership models, there is nobody better than Tony Russell at MGI. He's forgotten more about membership than most of us know. They've been a client of ours. He has spoken to our membership summits, and he has taken a very data-driven approach, testing what works and what doesn't work. He also just wrote a book that is very good, and he is one of those. He's one of the individuals who is a legitimate expert in it, as
Yeah,
opposed to someone who just puts expert into their LinkedIn profile.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Tony, we're coming for you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Dean.
And
Well,
actually, he need to have some other good names from his company too. We've worked some other great from MGI. They're good. They're both a competitor to us and a client of ours over the years, so they're a good company.
awesome.
That's a great combination.
Yeah. Very lucky to have that. Well, Lucas, thank you so much as always for being here today. And Dean, thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Where can people find you, by the way, online?
It's www.associationlaboratory.com. There are links to our Knowledge Center, which has all of our content from information on content strategy to environmental scanning reports to information on strategic governance. I encourage everyone. Also, I have a blog called From My Seat at the Bar, which is sometimes insightful and sometimes hilarious. So, so take your pick. I used to travel a lot, and you think of all the big ideas you get sitting by yourself at a hotel bar.
A hotel bar.
So my first blog was why the Manhattan is the perfect business drink.
One of my best ideas started on a bar napkin. That's
Exactly right.
true.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Oh, how we miss the hotel bars.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you guys again. We appreciate it. And we will see everyone here back in 2 weeks for another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations.
Thanks.